Good evening, explorers, and welcome back.
You got to pull the pin first! Stop it!
Where we're going to be breaking down various weapons, tools, and mechanics of the game's sandbox. Today, we're looking at the explosives the game has to offer, mostly consisting of various grenades. Grenades as a concept have been around for a very, very long time, mostly in the form of primitive black powder bombs. Nothing more than a metal or ceramic jar with gunpowder and a fuse. The first iteration of what we would consider a modern fragmentation grenade didn't come around until the English Mills bomb in 1915. Ever since its introduction, grenades have been a staple in any soldier's toolkit. Fragmentation grenades cause damage by two primary means. First, the shockwave emitted by the detonation, and second, the high-speed metal fragments that are shot in all directions. Fragmentation is very rarely modeled in games, but surprisingly is in ITR. At least with the typical frags. Before we move on to the grenades, we gotta have a quick chat about how explosives work in ITR. I did many hours of testing, and the only term I could describe how explosives work is jank. As I said before, in-game grenades produce both a shockwave and shrapnel to deal damage. The shrapnel is simple. It just randomly shoots off in all directions, dealing 30 damage to whatever it hits. The blast, however, is a bit more complicated. As you would expect, it deals the most damage the closer you are to the center. However, there are certain variables that can hinder the effectiveness. For example, certain types of cover. From my testing, I found there are generally two types, what I'll refer to as hard cover and soft cover. Hard cover tends to be large solid objects, like cars and shipping containers. These will completely negate blast damage regardless of proximity as long as the grenade isn't directly exposed to you. Soft cover, on the other hand, are usually thinner objects like walls and sandbags. These only reduce the damage received, but by a fairly substantial amount, to around 15%. Even though this is a huge reduction, it can still be pretty dangerous, especially around more powerful explosives. All that said, the consistency of all of this is shoddy at best. Even if the explosion behaves as expected, which it doesn't always do, it's very unclear what can be used as cover. Some walls and objects that I tested didn't have any cover properties at all and just straight up killed me. Basically, unless you already know for a fact that a certain piece of cover provides protection, it's going to be a gamble. Generally, regardless of cover, I always get as far away from the blast as I can. Another important thing to note about grenades is that, like all items, they have durability, and they can take damage from all sources. When that durability is depleted, they will immediately explode. This can happen even while in item slots or your pouch, but not your backpack. With all that out of the way, let's move on to the different explosives the game has to offer. First up is the RGD-5. Developed in the early 1950s and accepted into Soviet service in 1954, it is still in service to this day despite its age and has been copied by a handful of nations, notably China, Poland, and Bulgaria. Fun fact, some Georgian dude tried to assassinate former US President George Bush with one of these. He had a rag wrapped around it that was tight enough so that when he pulled the pin and threw it, the safety lever wouldn't come off, and it didn't explode. I should probably clarify that when I said Georgian, I meant this Georgia, not this one. Anyway, in-game it has a range of 40 meters? What? That can't be right. Well, that number came straight from CM Games Community Manager, and to some extent, I do think it's accurate. However, the circumstances for it to reach out and touch something at that distance are incredibly rare and essentially do chip damage. So in addition to the maximum damage range, I'm also adding in my expertly calculated effective damage range. How did I achieve such a figure? I lined up a bunch of AKs on the floor and recorded the distance where the damage fell off considerably. For the RGD-5, that range was around 4.5 meters. It has a maximum damage of 100, a shrapnel count of 6, and a fuse time of 3 seconds. They weigh 0.31 kilograms apiece, have a cost of 50, and are unlocked at security level 2, and can be found commonly all over the zone, mostly in crates. Overall, these things are a dime a dozen, and I don't find them particularly effective. Their relatively low damage and small range make them difficult, but somewhat safe-ish to use. Their only redeeming quality to me is that they're the most forgiving explosive weapon. Oh yeah, for this series going forward, instead of using the 1 to 10 rating system, I'm basing it off of how commonly it's used and its importance. Bear in mind, this is still 100% based on my opinion. I'll give the RGD-5 a situational rating. The alternative is just a little bit better and more consistent. Next is the F1. The Russian F1 was introduced around 1939, seeing use in World War II and beyond, even into modern conflicts. It was actually based off of the French F1, introduced in 1915. It was classified as a defensive weapon, with its intended use being by soldiers in defensive positions, with enough solid cover to avoid being hit by their own shrapnel. The distinct ridges seen in the construction of the F1s, along with many other older grenades, was to serve two purposes: to assist with shrapneling, and to improve grip. However, this would be later proven not as effective as initially believed. Also, F1s had the nickname of Limonka, or Little Lemons, given to them during the Russian Revolution. In-game, it has a max range of 60 meters, an effective range of 7 meters, a max damage of 300, a shrapnel count of 10, a fuse time of 4, a weight of 0.6 kilograms, and a cost of 75. They are unlocked at security level 3. These are a lot rarer to find compared to the RGD-5, but are far more effective, having a 50% blast radius increase and 3 times the damage. I don't use grenades too often, but when I do, these are my go-to, and can be a lifesaver in sticky situations. The big downside of these is their unforgiving margin for error. If you get caught in the blast without effective cover, you will die. In every test I did with these, I never survived the shockwave if I got hit by it. Despite the increased risk, I still see these as worth it, so I'll give them a useful rating. Moving on to the grenade launcher, the GP32, firing FOG-25 grenades. So there's actually 3 variants of the GP series of grenade launcher, and none of them are the GP32. The GP25, GP30M, and GP34. If the GP32 does exist, I was unable to find it. However, the one in game appears to be most closely modeled to the GP34, so that's the one we're going to go with. The GP series of launchers started with the GP25, with a design dating back as far as 1966 and being accepted into service in 1978. It was developed by the Sporting and Hunting Arms Central Design and Research Bureau, which is currently managed by the KBP. It is a breech-loaded 40mm launcher that fires caseless grenades. The GP34 we see in game is the latest variant, featuring universal compatibility with all AK pattern rifles, and even the AN-94. The projectile it shoots, the FOG-25, is actually pretty neat. It uses a high-low system and a driving band, essentially a soft metal wrap near the base of the grenade that flanges outward when the grenade is fired to fit the rifling. This kind of thing is often used in artillery shells. Also, the FOG-25P, a variant of the FOG-25, has an impact charge that detonates when it hits the ground, sending it flying up to roughly head level before detonating. I don't know how effective it would have been, but it sounds pretty neat. Anyway, back to the game. The GP32 fits any AK variant except for the AKS-74U. It has a weight of 1 kilogram, a cost of $1,500 in the shop, and is unlocked at security level 3. Stash spoiler. Skip to this time if you don't want to see that. There's a stash with one here in Pobeda with a bunch of grenades for it. As for the grenades themselves, they have a max range of 40 meters, have an effective range of 4.5 meters, and do a max damage of 200. They do not produce any shrapnel like the hand grenades, and explode on impact. They have a weight of 0.25 kilograms per nade, a cost of 75, and are unlocked at security level 3. Alright, let's talk about the elephant in the room. This thing kinda sucks, and it's all because of its horrid accuracy. As you can see, despite the fact that I am aiming in the exact same spot, my grenades are going everywhere. I had this plan to figure out a reliable method of ranging targets and giving adjustment info, just so that I could teach you how to safely and accurately hit targets at range, but with the spread, it just does not allow for such shenanigans, which is massively disappointing. Overall, this thing kinda sucks in my eyes. I feel like some people can make it work, but I just find it frustrating to use. And for that, I'm giving it a situational rating, only because I put it to good use a couple of times. Finally, we have our final explosive, the dreaded gas tank. Gas tanks, or propane tanks, date all the way back to 1857 with French chemist... No, I'm fucking with you. I don't give a shit about the history of propane. You can find them out in the world, little red bastards, can't miss them. They have a max range of 40 meters, an effective range of 4.5 meters, and a max damage of 300. After being shot, they will catch fire for 4 seconds before exploding. Overall, I hate these things. I get convulsions every single time I lay my eyes on one. I'm a charcoal man for life now. It gets a rating of fuck this thing. I wish I could empty it out, cut it open, and take a shit inside of it. Bonus entry, the RGD2. I'm gonna be honest, I tried to dig up some history on this thing, I just couldn't find it. So here's the quick and dirty. Soviet era smoke grenade, I think post World War II. It's basically just a cardboard tube with a fuse. I've seen videos of both the fuse being lit by pulling a string and striking this little dipple thing with a little red washer. In game, it has a weight of 0.5 kilograms, a cost of 25, and is unlocked at security level 2. Once activated, it will create a smokescreen that will obscure you from entities. Personally, I've never put this to serious use. The best case I could think of this is if you happen to get spotted by the BTR in a shitty spot. It's one of those things that is probably pretty good, but I never think to use it in a situation where it would be useful. And for that, I'll give it a situational rating. Overall, the grenades are one hell of a mixed bag. They carry a decent amount of risk, are only good in certain situations, but when that situation arises, it can be an absolute lifesaver. Anyway, I was going to do armor for the next episode, but I'm still waiting on some information. What else should I cover in the meantime? Leave a comment down below, would greatly appreciate it. Until next time, explorers.